Imagine that for the first 7 years of your life, you've never seen a photograph of yourself. In fact, you've never even seen your own reflection in a mirror. You don't know what color eyes you have, the shape of your facial structure, what hairdo you're sporting. In essence, you don't know what you look like. This was my unusual experience while growing up in a Chinese orphanage where there were no photographs or no mirrors. I was born in Nanjing, China, and at less than 1 year of age, I was involved in a fire that ended up taking my right leg. Shortly after the incident, I was abandoned on the street in front of the Nanjing orphanage, where I was taken in and lived for the next 7 years. During this time, I endured some pretty horrific conditions. There was never enough food. Corporal punishment was not the exception, but the norm. And childhoods were not to be enjoyed, but to be spent tirelessly working. During this time, we had no access to TVs, music, books, radio. In fact, I never remember even going outside once in 7 years. We had no form of communication with the outside world. And sure, there were moments where I wondered, is this life all that I will ever be? But nothing ever gave me an indication that it would change. But then an incredible miracle happened. My amazing parents, Joe and Susie Bassett, adopted myself and one other boy, who is now my brother. But in my 7-year-old eyes, this felt like the closest thing to an alien abduction. You see, I was leaving behind the only thing I'd ever known in my life, that orphanage, that home, and taken away by people that I surely thought were of different species. I arrived here in America at 7 years old, weighing all of 22 pounds, size 2 toddler. And as you all can see, not a whole lot has physically changed since then. But during this acculturation process, there were multiple layers of struggle. I resided in a small town, predominantly Caucasian, of just 1,600 people, where there were no other amputees. I didn't speak a word of English. I had absolutely no social skills. And everything I saw and experienced were things that were completely unknown to me. At times, these struggles felt so great that I desperately wanted to return back to the orphanage. I know that sounds crazy, and you know you've got serious problems when a government-run Chinese orphanage starts looking better than the country that invented blue jeans. But my new life was so overwhelming that I was constantly asking myself questions and my parents questions such as, why do we live in a house? Why are we getting in the car? What is this food in front of me? And why do I have to go to school? You see, as an orphan, I never received any formal education, so the concept of even going to school was unknown to me. Little did I know that school would be an avenue and an opportunity that introduced me to something that would become a life passion: sports. Growing up in my elementary years, many of my classmates participated in organized youth sports, and I thought, gosh, I want to join them. I thought that sports would help to make me whole. I wanted to be a part of something. And in the back of my mind, I thought maybe this would help transcend some of the social and cultural barriers that I was struggling with. I thought that sports would be the great equalizer. As it turns out, sports magnified the one thing that I never accounted for, and that was my disability. I joined City League soccer and softball and every imaginable sport. But what I quickly found out is that while I was always welcome to practice with the team, I was not always welcome to compete with the team. This meant sitting on the sidelines, becoming the bench warmer, not playing in countless games, and if I did play, it was when the score didn't matter. And it was this experience of being undermined that really brought to light for me the stigma that was attached with somebody who was an amputee. And it led to despair and low self-confidence and thoughts of inadequacy as I began to perceive myself in the ways that other people saw me. She's too small. She's not fast. She's not strong. She's physically incompetent. Luckily, this would change as I've learned and gained 3 valuable truths in my life. The first truth is that you can't do it alone. No one can do it alone. I've been so blessed to have an amazing family and great friends and some incredible supporters along the way. But there are 2 specific examples that highlight this point, that even at times when I did not believe in myself, even at times when I could not see my own potential, someone else did. The first example is a longtime mentor of mine who, in my teen years, asked me a pretty profound question. He said, "Scout, why is it that you insist on wearing a cosmetic cover over your prosthesis?" And I said, "Well, I just want to fit in. I really don't want to stand out. Being an amputee doesn't seem all that cool or acceptable. And as a girl, this carbon and titanium hardware didn't look very pretty or seem very feminine." And he said something that would forever change the way I looked at myself. He said, "Scout, don't you know that you cannot change what's happened to you in your life? There is no shame in being an amputee. Choose to embrace and focus on what you have gained and not what you have lost." So at 14 years old, I realized that I would never reach my full potential if I continued to allow other people's perceptions to define me and to paralyze me from truly living. I began to embrace who I am, and I vowed from that day that I would never be embarrassed or apologetic about where I'm from or the events that have transpired in my life. The second example is my involvement with the Challenged Athletes Foundation. They are a nonprofit organization that helps people all over the world to be able to get the adaptive sports equipment, funding, and resources to compete in sports. Because of the Challenged Athletes Foundation, a time that was once filled with despair turned into hope and possibility as I was introduced to a whole community of challenged athletes doing things that I never thought were possible. I received my first running leg because of CAF, and it was the start of fueling my competitive fire. Since then, I've been able to compete at several world championships and medal, and now I'm pursuing my love for running as a sprinter. Outside of athletics, I was able to take the confidence that I gained in sports and apply it to my academics, where I eventually earned a scholarship to UCLA. I'm so grateful. I am so grateful for all the ways that the Challenged Athletes Foundation has transformed me as a person from the inside out. But perhaps the one thing that I'm most appreciative of is the opportunity to connect and to engage with other amputees, mainly through our mobility clinics that we host all over the United States, where we teach amputees of all ages and abilities how to run for the first time, or just the basic skills to simply improve their activity level. Growing up, I didn't have amputee role models, and I certainly wasn't exposed to the opportunities that were available to someone that had a physical challenge. So it has become a life passion of mine to mentor other amputees, in particular young kids, by showing them what is possible, so that from the moment they acquire their disability, whether it's congenital or later on in life, that they have the resources and the equipment to be able to not miss a beat and to know that there are no limits on what they can achieve in their life. I have to say that of all the things that I've been able to do on this young journey, this role as a mentor is one that I absolutely cherish, and I firmly believe that it is the most important and meaningful thing I have done in and with my life. The second truth I've learned is that my greatest struggles have not been physical, but rather they have been the battles I've fought within myself. clearly, you can see that I am not the prototypical build of a competitive athlete. Now, I know this photo is a little bit exaggerated because the proportions are so extreme, but I think you understand my point here. And the key about not fitting the mold is that, of course, it comes with its host of doubters and critics who said, oh, you'll never be able to compete at an elite level, and why do you even pursue sports? And I have to admit, I have to be honest about something. There have been plenty of times, and throughout my life, I fought a lot of battles about what I could do and what I could be. And so there have been times where I've believed more in the naysayers than I did in myself. I think as we all sometimes do. But their pessimistic views is what drove me to keep going. And the beauty about being underestimated is that we have an opportunity to defy the odds. And in order to do this, mental fortitude has to be our strength. With our creativity, we can redefine what it means to be successful. As an athlete, it is necessary to be physically strong, but it's even more important to be mentally strong. And what I mean by that is anyone can really train their body to do just about anything. But it takes immense willpower and courage to fight your inner demons and to relentlessly work towards a goal or a dream. I think it's also important to note that these struggles I've had within myself about, battling self-doubt and feelings of inadequacy and fear and failure has been a continuous process. It has not always been an upward linear path, and in fact, there have been many lows and many bumps in the road. But learning to develop mental fortitude has pushed me through some very difficult times. And finally, this is what else I know to be true. We all have the capacity to be able to rise above failure and disappointment. Now, I'd list all my failures for you because there are plenty, but TED didn't give me 3 hours, so I'm just going to focus on one. This past June, I competed at U.S. Paralympic track and field trials, and I set a goal to do this. I dreamt about this moment. I trained relentlessly, and guess what? On one of the largest stages in our sport, I failed. I didn't qualify for the London Games. And on the night of my last race, after I crossed the finish line, looked up at the scoreboard, I began to walk away from the grandstands into the shadows, and tears began to flow like it was raining. But in that moment, I felt massive heartbreak, a life dream crushed. The doubters who said I couldn't do it seemed to be right. Simply stated, I felt defeated. But in the days and weeks that followed, I remembered what I've always known to be true about failure. It can either destroy us or break us, or it has the power to motivate us and to push us forward. So for the next 4 years, I've using the pain and the disappointment of what happened at trials as fuel to work even harder, to become stronger physically and mentally, and to rededicate myself so that 4 years from now, the outcome will hopefully be different. I want to close by leaving you with this. We don't have to accept the limitations that others place on us. It's easy to buy into the labels, but it takes courage and it takes strength to refuse them time and time again. In fact, none of us should have to look in the mirror and see a reflection created by anyone but ourselves. Sometimes we're not always proud of that reflection, and we don't always like the person looking back at us. But ultimately, we each have the power to change our destiny, to mold our future, to recreate who we are and who we want to become, and to reinvent the way we see ourselves. And we must remember that we are not always the product of our past or our circumstances. We can be much more than that. The incredible gift about being alive and here is that every day is an opportunity to begin a new race. Sometimes this happens even every hour. We just have to choose when to start. And keep in mind that it's not always how you start, but it's how you finish that counts. Thank you.